So last week, we were having pretty long build times due to Travis, I think, doing some throttling. So I had implemented the GitHub Actions in one of my repos, so I thought we could switch to it for Orchard as well. So the initial version had dev CI, one big CI file, basically, that would run on multiple OS. So it would run Ubuntu, Windows, Mac OS, run the test, the unit test. And then we also had a functional test that would run on each build, each PR, each dev build. So we'd run the functional test on all the database as well. So we have MVC test that I just run on 1DB, well, no DB actually, because they don't need it. And the CMS would run on all the supported database. So SQLite, PostgreSQL, MySQL, and which last one there? MS SQL. So GitHub Action allow you to use service containers. So basically just loading a Docker image and exposing it as a service to your main container that runs your test here. So basically the same as Docker Compose when you have multiple containers running concurrently. So what's neat is that by using the Orchard environment variables, I was able to just run the functional test that use Cypress on each database. So the more we add functional tests, we can run them on all the database to make sure that the CMS works on all those. What else did I do in here? I removed the old build files. Yes, I also changed a bit how Cypress works. So the default tenant is actually, right now it's hard-coded. I put the YesSQLDB, so I ran the software as a service recipe and set up a default tenant. And I put the files here. So the first step of the test is to copy that tenant in the app data. And then we don't need, there's no more dependency in between tests. Because before you needed to run this one first to set up the software as a service tenant, the default one. Now, this one's already pre-created. So all the tests could technically be run in parallel. Each file could be run in parallel. Cypress actually supports that. I never tested it. I also added some other tests for the other teams that we have. So coming soon, it's doing a small check here. It's running the recipe, headless as well. And I also test the SAS recipe to make sure that one works too. There's also some small change to the Cypress Orchard Core package to support multiple databases, basically. So like if the database provider is pre-filled by the environment variables, don't set it to SQLite. But if you don't set it to anything, it defaults back to SQLite. So that's the bulk of the changes. So the first iteration, as I mentioned before, was using one big file and it was running all these tests. That was great. The build times were still 10 minutes because all the jobs would run in parallel. But it was spinning up 8 jobs at a time. And with GitHub Actions free tier, you have 20 concurrent jobs. So we thought it might be best to actually like scale it down for PRs. So I refactored it a little bit so that we have a different files for PRs and for the dev build. And I also made some jobs manual. So, before I was running the functional test on all the database all the time. Well, now I changed it to be a manual trigger. So we can run it on any branch at any time, but instead of being automatic, it's going to be, we are going to have to go click a button to run it. So this makes it so that only 2 jobs run in when you make a PR, 2 jobs run at the same time instead of 8. Yeah, so you can see I just moved it around. So we have the Mac OS test here. That's manual. The PR CI will run on Windows and Ubuntu only, no, not macOS. And it will do the unit test and functional test, CMS and MVC. And the release one, targeting the pushes to dev branch, will actually run Ubuntu Windows and deploy the NuGet packages to Cloudsmith, and also push the Docker images. So we have a Docker image for Windows here that only runs for the Windows OS, and the Linux one for the Linux OS. Yeah. What else here? So the include symbols, actually this flag was creating duplicate new package files. So every time I did this command, it was pushing the .symbol .new package files to Cloudsmith in sequence. So there was a duplicate issue. So basically just remove the symbols and everything was good. I actually learned afterwards that we already include the PDBs inside the NuGet package. And I think another PR aims to fix that. After that, like Sebastian mentioned, we just remove this for PRs. Maybe we're going to put it back later. It's just not running the build if you modify markdown files or the mkdocs files. Yeah, making the build optional for PRs would allow us to add this back, and it would be up to the maintainers to make sure that the build actually ran. So to run the action manually, what we can do is go to the Actions tab here in GitHub, and you can see all the workflow. So you get the release CI. So this will be dev and master branch or releases. That's still to be determined. So you have the macOS test. I ran them manually once just to make sure it works. The functional test on all database. A front-end asset build validation. So this was just a test that I did to make sure that the front-end asset were properly built. So what it's doing, I'm redoing a gulp build, I think. It's install, npm install, long npm install. So running gulp rebuild. And it's rebuilding all the JavaScript, CSS assets, and then doing a git diff. So looking if any files were modified by this. And there is some, but I'm not sure it's an issue. It might be an end of file, end of line issue, or maybe sometimes, we don't rebuild and this version of Bootstrap is still using the old one. I'm not sure yet. We might make improvements to this eventually. But for now, it's still manual if we feel like triggering it. And the PR, so the PR builds are all here. So to run an action manually, just do one workflow and you select the branch you want to run it on. The branch must have this workflow defined in it, so it won't work for any old branch. So maybe this one, yeah, see, this one was not updated with dev, so you can't run it, but you can run it for dev. And yeah, it should just run it. There you go. So it's going to go and run the functional test on all the database in parallel. And this takes about 10 minutes. Did you have anything else to add, Sebastian?
So many. I don't like the fact that it's already built in the database and you have the database in the Git system, because nobody will ever know that it's broken because the first recipe has changed and needs to be changed on the SAS recipe. So it's breaking the unit test, so that nobody will understand that. So I preferred the functional test to just check that the previous recipe has run. If they haven't, then run it like it was doing before. And if it's an issue with parallelization, then just add a big lock or say no, well, or run it, I don't care, but it has to be simple, and so we don't have to maintain that because nobody will know.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't sure when I did it, but I think there's a PR that's auto setup that I think would be used support this. So
Okay.
I forget
Well,
what it's called, but
I missed it in the first PR. So second comment is why we tried to reduce the number of jobs. You didn't try to reduce the number of jobs. It's not actually the issue. The issue is that with GitHub Actions, we have a limit that we have not reached yet, and I'm not sure how it works, but the limit of 72 hours of build. If you go on the actions and you show the latest PRs, for instance, here, you see 2 hours ago, 6 minutes. So with the current state with few jobs, it's 6 minutes per build. We have a build per commit on each PR. So let's say someone creates a PR and every 10 minutes commits their job, their changes, because it happens. Like you work on a PR and you just, oh, let's change this file commit, let's change this file commit, let's change this file commit, and so on. You will get, like, let's look at this morning. In the last 12 hours, we have 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Like we have how many? At least an hour of work, if not 2 hours, okay, of builds. And maybe it was not the peak of PR work, okay?
So is it 6 or 12? Because there's 6 here.
It's 6
and 5
it's
here.
They're in parallel. So we get, so there is a limit per job and a limit per run.
Okay.
So we have 72 hours per run of, okay, here, so it took 6 minutes and 12 seconds in total here out of 72 hours. And there is also a limit per job, which I think might be 6 hours per job definition. So in this case, it would be 5 and 5. So I have to check again that. But my concern was that after a week, if we run the function, because we could run all the functional tests, all the unit tests on every database, on every OS, then after a week, we'll reach 100 hours and you can't build CI anymore. Okay, so screwed. So because it's just been 1 week, I want to be secure and see if we reach this limit and what happens if we reach it also. Is it blocked or is it just throttled or whatever? So that's my concern. And I don't think there was any limitation with Abior. So we'll see. That's why I wanted that's why also, yeah, refactored it to split it. And when you say you can run it by clicking, at least what we could do is once a week, let's build all the functional tests on all databases, because we can also schedule these jobs to say every Sunday do that and send an email if it fails or mark the build as failing, or so we can know that something was broken in the last week and we can look at it. This way, it won't run on every commit of every PR because it doesn't make sense. That would be nice if we could, but it doesn't make sense for two reasons. First, because you don't break them all the time, and it's burning CPU for nothing, and it's making all the PRs to go through 20 minutes of CI before you can merge them. So, yeah. So at least if we do it regularly on the dev branch, or even if we just did it once the PR is merged, like, okay, every test passed and the functional test worked in SQLite. Now, when we merge to dev, let's build dev, but with all the tests, just to be sure that we didn't break dev. So we could break dev, but at least, yeah, we won't run it all the time. Yeah,
okay,
so
only on merge. That makes
I'm
sense.
not saying that today because I don't want to again burn too much CPU. I prefer to add more stuff as we see that we still have margin. But we could at least schedule it every week because we want to know that we have broken something, not to discover it when we deploy. So yeah, and that's very good. It's super nice. We run many more things. It's faster because we limit so that's great. All the OSCs, all the databases. There is a pre-check also that Jean-Philippe made, which is that it will fail fast. If there is a build issue, this is the first thing it does, just trying to build stuff on one OS, and then only if it passes, then it will run everything else. It won't start all the jobs in parallel, and they will all fail at build. There is the first check on that.
I didn't do that one.
And also what Jean-Philippe did is that if a functional test fails, it will upload the images of the screens that failed. So we can have an idea of what was output in the artifact. So there is a link, then you can download the file that was saved. Super nice.
Yeah.
Was it the log files from the app data as well,
Also,
Jason?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so.
Okay, cool. But do you only get
Because
them
it's
if you get a failure?
Do what?
Do you only get
Failure,
the log
yes.
files on failure?
I'm 44.
Yes, and failure.
Cool. Very good.
So a Cypress screenshot and updated logs.
And there is screenshots. You can even record videos. You could even upload the video of the functional test. And Jean-Philippe showed me like how it works. You can see that. Yeah, it's beautiful. You
Yeah,
can see the browser being filled and buttons clicked. And super fast, so snappy. Like when you are not limited by your hands to type and click. It goes so fast to build a site, which
Yeah.
is good also. It's super reactive to build a website in Orchard Code.
I like it for development. It makes everything faster to test your recipes and migration. Yeah, not always setting tenant manually. But yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.